Hi everybody, welcome to this new series about building construction vehicles in Planet Coaster. I'll be using the Construction Vehicle Workshop version 1, which you can find in the James Viago Steam Workshop, and I'll be creating a variety of front end loaders with the lift assemblies at various heights and the steering assemblies angled in different positions. If assembling from the component parts just looks too difficult, just download the sets of completed loaders from the Steam Workshop. But if you do want to assemble your own configurations from the components in this video, you can download the Construction Vehicle Workshop and then follow the instructions here. So don't forget to add a gridded piece before you separate your vehicle from the workshop building, so your vehicle maintains its integrity as a single building, because without a gridded piece in it, it'll just become a collection of scenery items. And all the vehicles I've saved as blueprints for you have gridded pieces just under the ground at the right rear corner of the vehicle. Before we dive in, please remember to give us a shout out if you do use these components or vehicles, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you're using them and what you think of them. Thanks. Quite a long time to build all these components, probably 3 or 4 weekends, and then another pretty full-on weekend to build this workshop with all the parts laid out and labelled and put all the variations together. Actually, the variations didn't take that long. It was fixing up all the line-up errors that were creeping in during the construction of the components. So as I was building each one, I had to try to get it to line up with the previous components, and of course, because they're physically separated, the small errors start creeping in. Anyway, in the previous video, which is in the sqmsygames experiments series, I showed how to get all the components to fit together, and most of them required a lot of tweaks or small adjustments. So why build it in parts then? Well, the main reason I built it in pieces was it's very difficult to accurately select and adjust pieces when there are so many pieces packed into such a small volume, and trying to isolate, say, just the lift assembly when it's completely surrounded by everything else to change the lift position or whatever is almost impossible. So I had to build them in component by component so that I could quickly grab a sub-assembly and then manipulate it and fit it into the project. I can also reuse the sub-assemblies, of course, because if I now make, say, a roller or some other kind of vehicle, I can reuse sub-assemblies from this build, whereas if I had it all in one vehicle, it would be very difficult to reach in and just extract out the parts that I want to make a new vehicle out of it. What else is there to do? Well, as you can see, manipulating large sets of pieces is problematic when the XYZ or ZXY tool isn't lined up based on the background grid of the game, or based on what you think of as fairly obvious lines. Like, for example, in a long straight piece, you would expect the axes to line up with the dimensions of that piece, but the minute you add a piece that has its the center of the axis for its tool on a corner or off on the edge somewhere, it completely messes up the orientation of the advanced move tool. So it makes it just about impossible to manipulate those things. So you have to group together pieces that have the same orientation or positioning. And what that means is I sometimes have to move the components about in subsets, because, for example, if I include the cable, the XYZ tool is pointing off in some random direction. So I might move all of the blocky shapes across first and then move the cables across second to get them into the right position. And it was those sorts of problems that led to significant lineup errors in the construction of the individual pieces. Another thing that's very frustrating is trying to make mirror image items. I see that just the ladder just flashed by in the video there. Making the ladder, for example, is very difficult. You can't just select an object and go flip this, around some axis. You have to individually construct the mirror image, and that can take a long time. Anyway, you've seen all of that in the component construction and the final assembly video, so I won't go through all that again. These small details, I really like it to look good up close. That's just sort of a personal preference I have. And so I put quite a lot of time into adjusting all the cables at each of the different steering assembly angles to get it to look like they were naturally hanging there, even at all the different angles. And fortunately, there's plenty of room under there for a bunch of cables to hide the pistons, where I made these hydraulic cylinders, but they're too long because of the parts that I had to use to build them. So I had the lift assembly cylinders sort of doubling as steering assembly cylinders, because of course there would be hydraulic cylinders also driving the steering units, but I couldn't have the hydraulic cylinders outer casing and cylinder rod. I've just got this piece that's poking through from the lift assembly, so I just surrounded that with cables to try and make it sort of corner of the eye correct. But of course, if you look up close, you can see that it's a piece poking through, which obviously isn't realistic, but that's the best we could do at this point. So for the rest of the video, you can see I'm sort of cut fading really quickly through all of this, because just cutting and pasting from into the different angles for the lift assembly and the different angles for the steering assembly, and then editing everything so that it all fits together nicely and the cables look right and so on, it's quite repetitive. So I just kept ripping through. So what else can I talk about to do with this creative detailing? Generally, an idea for a close-up detailed build like this comes to me as a side effect of something else I'm doing. So the construction vehicles, for example, I wanted to explore the idea of guests roaming through a park that's under construction and having in that park construction site exhibits from the contractors that are involved in the park construction, and that meant that I'd need construction vehicles. So then I start building and I realise it's easy to get a basic outline, but it's pretty hard to do the detail, and that throws me into experiment mode. So as you can understand as players, hours go by and I realise that I now have a better idea how I might build a micro-detailed item, in this case vehicles. So I'll write a brief plan of attack and I start recording. I grab some footage and make a quick intro and a thumbnail, and then upload it all and hack it together in the YouTube editor. So that's what ends up as a so-called sqmsygames experiment in the YouTube channel. By the way, the last row of this set of 12 wasn't high enough to empty into a dump truck, so this was me trying to lift them all up even higher, so I could later on build a dump truck that I could drop rocks or whatever into. So anyway, so I'm building away, making experiments, and eventually I get to the point where I think, ooh, I might actually like to use that in a park build. And at that point, I switch approaches. So I go to a different approach where I'll write some sort of script, I suppose, although script is a fairly exotic term for a bunch of sketchings in a notebook. But anyway, a sketchy script that tells some kind of story that I hope is going to be useful, and then do like a video of the build item, such as the water series and the weirs and dams from a previous series, or this front-end loader video. So then I can make a bunch of raw footage, cut and hack that into some sort of storyline, and write a bunch of bullet points, which I'm talking to now, just touching on things that have occurred to me that might be of interest. And in this case, it's a vague script of a video that's supposed to show how you can use the components I've made to build up vehicles from the components made in the sqmsygames experiment series. The end result, of course, of a video can end up being a bit off course, because I'll be rambling away talking about stuff generally, and the video editing doesn't always match as I planned or intended that it would. And then my daughter, Sam, Sqmsy Sam, she comes in and rescues me from my own editing and ranting, and composites the whole thing and tries to make it somewhat presentable so that you can enjoy watching it, hopefully. Oh, see, I said again. It's impressive how many ums and ahs she can snip out using the editing tools. YouTube editors are not particularly good for cutting out very small snippets of wording. Oh, this is the point where I realised that set of 9 was going to have to be a set of 12, because the final 2 are not lifting up high enough to drop into a dump truck. So you can see I've pasted another row of 3 in there, and in this last set it's not going to be forward facing left and right, it's higher still, and highest, and tipping the bucket over to dump into the dump truck. So what else is there on this video that's worth chatting about? Well, I realise after how difficult it was to construct these final vehicles from the sub-assemblies that you're probably not going to want to do that. You might, and if you're sort of fanatical about detail like me, then good luck. You're welcome to do so. Probably you're just going to want to download one of these 12 that I've pre-assembled and just use those as they are. So that's made the video a lot longer because you're watching me build all the different versions, but I've compensated for it. It was actually quite a lot longer than this, of course. I've just cut faded all through it to speed it all up, and hopefully that's going to make the Steam uploads, or downloads in your case, a lot more useful for you. So in the experiment series I'm going to keep going making components, and in this series with the voiceovers I'm going to assemble different vehicles using combinations of the old components that you already see here and new components. So for example, if I make a rolling drum, I could then use the articulated base of this vehicle to make a road roller, or something for flattening out the earth in your park after you've been digging away for a wee while. That's about it for this video, I think. We're coming to the end. I hope this has been useful. If you do use these vehicles, please let me know. I mean, of course you're most welcome to, but it's fun to know that people are getting some pleasure out of it or having a good time with them. If you come up with any suggestions or ways to edit them and improve them, then let me know that too. Comment on the forum, or comment on the videos directly. Oh, and of course don't forget to subscribe. So that's it for this video. I will see you again next time, and bye for now.